So, hello and welcome to everyone, wherever you are joining us from. We're very excited to be hosting this webinar today. Are you ready for Dora? And I'm very pleased to be welcoming our guest speakers. First of all, Yelena Matone. She is the CISO at the European Investment Bank. Yelena has been nominated for numerous awards in cybersecurity, is a member of the Cybercrime Group in the World Economic Forum, and is the president and founding board member of Women Cyberforce. Amit Morson is our VP of Services here at Mazebolt. Amit has many years of experience in the cybersecurity industry in multiple technical support and professional services roles at companies like Cynet, Aqua, McAfee, and Converse. So before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping points. So this session is being recorded and we'll be sending it to your emails following the webinar. So if you find the session interesting, please share it with your colleagues. Feel free to ask any questions by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom browser. We will answer them at the end of the session in a Q&A session. We'll also be sharing some additional links in the chat, so please feel free to take a look and download. So let's get started. And first of all, I'd like to kick off the session actually with a polling question to get everyone in the mindset of this important topic. So I'm just going to display our first polling question. One second. Here we go. So please, obviously this polling question is anonymized, so please answer it as you feel appropriate. What is the status of DORA readiness in your organization? Please please let us know what you think, and it'll be interesting to get some feedback from Yelena and Amit on their thoughts on really, as a cross section, obviously a small cross section of the industry, but how these numbers go. So we'll give it a few more seconds. Great, we've got more than 50% answering, which is great. Let's just give it a couple more moments and then we can look at the results. Okay, couple more. Anyone else want to? We have plenty of people on the call, so please respond to this poll. We will only be obviously displaying, the results, so no one has to feel self-conscious if they answer don't know or not started. All right, so let's end the poll and share the results. Well, it looks interesting. So 27% have not started, 59 in progress. That sounds very encouraging, actually. Only 5% compliant and 9% don't know. So, Yelena, what do you make of these numbers? As a cross section, obviously it's not statistically significant, but how would you react to these results?
So let me go with the positive one. 5% that are already compliant. Bravo. I'm quite impressed that we even have 5% that is already compliant, because this is quite a regulation to deal with and controls to put in place. So bravo to those. I start with this positive note. 29% of non-compliant, like not started. Well, I would say, well, depends actually which organizations, or is it financial institutions or not. Maybe they're not in financial institutions, but if this is in financial institutions, I would encourage that you start maybe today or perhaps yesterday on this, because it's quite a lot of work. And then for the rest, I'm quite impressed, because it is a very good number to have over 50% of people who are working on this already. And plenty of people that I know are already in this boat and working on being compliant. So it shows the willingness and knowledge and awareness about what it takes to comply with this by next year.
Great. Amit, any thoughts to add?
Yeah, I think that it really depends on where they are right now, right? Because there are organizations that are in their nature, and because they comply with other type of compliances, financial or security, they are already at the 70 something percent point, and then they don't have too much work to do. But we know that there are a lot of organizations that are around the 20, 30% coverage, and then there is a lot of work. And if they are at this place, they're kind of too late to start, right? There's a lot of work to be done, and yeah, it's time to start.
Sure. So, yeah, well, this is why we're having this webinar. We there is a lot to do. I think there's, sometimes fear of the unknown. So we hope that this session today will be valuable and at least some food for thought vis-a-vis next steps. So maybe Amid, let me hand over to you. We prepared some discussion points, and please take it away.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you, Elena, for joining us. And I actually wanted to start with some background. Elena, you had a lot of experience working around DORA and helping organization to be compliant with DORA. So I want to understand a little bit of the background and who and what is behind this entire compliance here.
Definitely. First of all, thank you also for having me. It's a pleasure to be on this panel and talk about DORA and raise awareness, at least to those who haven't started, those that started or are compliant, kudos. But perhaps everybody will take a piece of something from today on our panel here. But basically, DORA, which stands for Digital Operational Resilience Act, is a proposed regulatory and adopted already framework by the European Union, European Commission. And basically what it does, it aims at the operational resilience of the European Union's financial sector. And what it means is that all the financial institutions of EU will have to comply with it by next year, of January 2025. And what it does, in essence, is it's part of this broader effort, I would say, to strengthen the EU's financial regulatory framework, particularly in the response to increasing digitalization of financial services. And as we all know, growing cybersecurity threats, especially in financial institutions. It's definitely a lot of work, but as a practitioner, I cannot say it's not going to be hard. It's not going to be a lot of work to comply with it. But at the same time, as a practitioner, I have to admit that this is very much welcomed and something that we need. We do need to strengthen our postures.
So if we look at the existing compliances or regulation, they are really either depend regarding financial, either on personal information that most financial organizations obviously have, and security. So DORA comes from a different angle, right? It comes from an angle of resilience. What do you think prompted this regulation to begin with?
So for me personally, I really, as you said, DORA is something special. It really heralds the new era for me in the regulatory scrutiny on how works are going to be done. So they're basically, DORA will compel all the financial institutions to strengthen their defenses against the numerous ICT-related disruptions and threats. And personally, to me, what sets DORA apart is this proactive approach to digital resilience testing, as you mentioned. And in essence, DORA encourages organizations to adopt, I would like to call it a Breaking Bad mentality, but in a good way, where ethical hacking or deliberately probing one's own organizations for vulnerabilities and resilience is not just acceptable, but in fact even encouraged. And that's, for me, something new. So it's not just the check marks off on your compliance, but it's actually making you check what you said you have the controls on in a real time and probe your own network and systems.
Right. So when we look at DORA compared to other existing regulations, what does it specifically add on top of regulations? If we talk about ISOs, different ISOs, SOC, and other compliances, what is the added value of DORA, do you think, when we really break down into the article and the specific specifications of things?
Indeed. So there are 5 main components I would like to maybe mention about DORA that adds on top of these existing regulations and compliances. And I'll probably repeat some from what I said before, but operational resilience requirements, It's what I talked about now, that we really are testing the operational resilience, not just checking the marks off on the controls in the face of these cyber threats, the IT failures, the other disruptions, including the measures, to identify, to mitigate operational risks, maintain critical business functions, minimize the impact of disruptions of financial stability. So on top of it, when you think about testing on the resilience, on operational resilience, you're testing the systems, the networks. But at the same time, you're testing, while you're doing it, you're also testing your processes and policies and procedures that you have. Then the second thing that I would like to add is incident reporting and notification that DORA now brings up. So where DORA mandates basically the enhanced incident reporting and notification requirements for financial institutions in EU, and it includes reporting significant cyber incidents to regulators and other relevant authorities, as well as notifying the affected customers and shareholders in a timely manner. So that's something new that was not really firm in a stone with other regulations. Then we have third-party risk management, where DORA places much greater emphasis on managing risks associated with the third parties or service providers, including cloud service providers, fintechs, what have you. And now at this point, financial institutions are really required to assess and monitor operational resilience of their third-party vendors, ensuring they meet certain standards. And perhaps to this point, we have done the works, but when you look at the RTS and the implementation parts, there's a lot more work. And when you look really clearly into these controls of what it entails to do this in a lot more detail, so meaning with the resource, budget, and everything. And then another aspect is, I would mention ICT risk management, where DORA is introducing requirements for managing risks related to information and communication technology systems, so including cyber risks, data protection, IT outsourcing. So there you think about the fact that maybe if you haven't developed the policies for all these things, especially IT outsourcing, where there's a lot of work, and the bigger you are, the bigger the works are around it, guess what? You'll have to start from there. And then on top of it, you will have to do these risk assessments. So they will require you to implement robust ICT risk management framework practices on how to safeguard regulatory oversights. And then we have this regulatory oversights incorporation, which is also big and new, where DORA is trying to enhance the oversight and cooperation mechanisms to ensure these consistent implementations and enforcements of operational resilience requirements across EU. But also what it does is, important point, is coordination mechanisms between national competent authorities and collaborations between and within relevant stakeholders, such as EU agencies or international partners. So, I mean, these 5 components really bring a lot more into DORA than what we had before in any of the regulations.
Yeah, that's very interesting. One of the things that I've noticed while going through the regulation is that it seems like it makes you validate your third-party vendors, right? In a lot of cases, when we see with other regulations, you have to have some kind of solution, right? So what we've seen, and I've seen in the past as well, is that companies acquire some kind of solution. They check the checkbox. I have the solution. It's installed somewhere in the network on some server, and that's it. And I'm done. But what DORA is doing is making you check that this service actually works. And this is one of the things that I've noticed that is different in DORA than a lot of other regulations. Do you think that they really had intention here? Like they understand this status where companies acquire solutions but don't really apply anything to them, or it's something that what do you think of that?
No, you probably have a very good point on this. I would agree in how you put it together, that yes, people get solutions. Either they don't use it fully to the point where the solutions can be used, so there goes a waste of money on some of the things, but also the risks of not configuring such solutions in a secure manner. So what DORA is asking you, okay, you have all of these solutions around to protect, but have you configured them in a secure manner? And how they're asking you to know, because you can easily check off, but now they're asking you to test the resilience of your organization. So by breaking bad attitude of ethical hacking, you're able to test the resilience and maybe perhaps the configurations that you have put in a lot of solutions. So I really agree with what you're adding there.
Yeah. So no more checkbox solutions. From now on, your solution have to actually work, right? So this is a very big change in attitude.
Yeah, completely.
So you've worked with a lot of organizations in Europe and helped them get to these DORA compliance. What are the main gaps that you've seen in organization when you look at where they are and where they should be? Obviously, a lot of those organizations are already compliant with our compliances, but you see some specific gaps. I know. What are they?
Definitely. I mean, I talk a lot with a lot of the peers in the industry to see what their pain points are, and we all, exchange information and things on how everybody's standing on this. But in general, what I see, or I would say some of the gaps are scope and specificity. So existing regulations may not cover such breadth as we talked about these 5 points, or even specifics of digital operational resilience as DORA is covering it. For instance, DORA covers additional domains as compared to ISO or EBA guidelines that we already cover in or should cover in the financial institutions. So organizations often struggle with this comprehensive scope of DORA, including these extensive requirements from ICT management, third-party risk management that I mentioned, and incident reporting. And existing regulations might not require these immediate incident reportings as DORA does to the authorities, so leading organizations to the lack of necessary procedures and technology to comply with. So these are some of the biggest gaps. Then again, add on top of it, I want to add the digital resilience testing on all critical systems that you can imagine the amount of time it will take. So perhaps for smaller financial institutions, it will not take them much time, but then you'll have the challenge of how much money you're going to spend for expensive exercises. But that's one of those gaps that needs to be, people need to think about how to do it. But if you think about bigger organizations where there's a lot more critical services, to cover it will take a lot more time. And, also integration of third-party risks. Many organizations have not fully integrated third-party risk management into their overall cyber resilience strategy. And we would be surprised when I talk to some of the people that they really have not covered it, which is a key aspect of DORA as well. So outsourcing policies, as I mentioned before, might not be fully mature, or critical assets might not be identified along with also not just critical assets and systems, but also the dependencies to those critical assets and systems. So there's plenty, when I talk to the peers and what's happening with industry, plenty of gaps to talk about.
So it sounds like a lot of work, right? And a lot of the things that we've seen, is that organizations take the time to prepare for being audited for a certain compliancy. But again, as you've just mentioned, a lot of the things in DORA have to be continuous, right? You have to do it ongoing, right? And it sounds like you need a lot of automations to get all of this going. So
I was just going to say automation is one of those answers to where you can have it. Not everything, but there are things that help with automating things.
Yeah, if you have some kind of task that you have to maintain all the time, basically, if we look at testing, like testing your vendors, your third-party vendors, is everything working all right, right? One of the things, and this is, obviously Mazebold is sponsoring this webinar, and when we're looking at testing specifically, for instance, in DDoS, how can you continuously test for DDoS or for anything? You have a lot of, if we talk about vulnerabilities in application, vulnerabilities in your network, how do you continuously do that? So, when we talked about this earlier, we came up with a lot of those tests need to be automated, and you need to find solution for the different areas of your security. How do you automate this testing and make sure that you comply all the time? Again, DORA is not a yearly or 3 yearly auditing process. It's something that's going on all the time. And so
exactly. So I mean, you touched the point, as I said, on the automation, which is really the biggest benefit where applicable, because not everything can be applicable. So solutions like DDoS solution that you have on simulating the attacks is one of the ways to check for that digital resilience testing and to show how resilient you are to the attacks. I mean, I talked about Tiber. Tiber is not automated, but it's also another way of how we can think about testing the resilience. However, we cannot take it for granted as automated, but it's a very, very important exercise to do. And in general, any of these automation tools and how you can find it, first of all, I would say one of the ways is to talk to the peers of what they're using, what they will use. For third parties, for example, there are also automated tools that we can think of, because it's also going to be a very laborious work for practitioners to do. But the point being in all of this, I think what the key benefits for automation and why people should think more about automation where applicable is this efficiency and accuracy. With automation, definitely we know that this helps manage the vast amount of data and security logs efficiently. And at the same time, it reduces the human errors that we can have. So it's really important where you can to look at the good tools and use automation. And then also scalability. I would say automation really allows you organizations to easily scale up or down on their security operations as they grow or they decline, depending on what's happening with the business. But it really can ensure that this increased volume of data, which usually happens on the increased side, hopefully, for our businesses, and the transactions are handled effectively through this automation.
So if you'll have to give like financial organization facing DORA now and advice in regards to how to test their resilience, business continuity, and the readiness of the entire technological stack, what your main advice would be?
So testing business continuity readiness, I would say there are some, let's start from the basics, which we hope everybody already is doing, simulation exercises. So conducting regular simulation exercises to mimic the various operational disruptions that you can have, and everybody knows within their environment what those could be. So cyber attacks to test the response procedures and team readiness, to look at your cyber incident response plans. Then we already touched upon the use of automated testing tools. So to try to simulate the attacks on networks, on systems, on applications, and other critical infrastructure so that you can assess better the response and recovery capabilities of your organization. Then, leveraging also cloud technology to create test environments that mirror actual operations if you're able to do it and afford it. So allowing basically testing of different disaster scenarios for your organizations and the recovery processes without impacting the live environment. And again, I go back to a lot of automation, automated providers that can do some attack simulations, as well as the Tiber exercise, which is not automated, but again, I repeat, it's also extremely good exercise. And then I think what's important at the end of the day with all of this is integrating your works with incident response and with the teams and with the plans so that you can quickly have the lessons learned, update your procedures, and know what's going on continuous basis.
Good. I definitely agree there. Now, we've mentioned it that DORA adds a lot of work to the existing teams, and as we know, that a lot of organizations cannot afford to extend this team indefinitely, right? So automation is one solution to get to this kind of continuous testing. But looking at all of this right now, do you think that DORA, at the bottom line, it helps organization become more efficient, or basically hinders their ability to do things because of all of this additional work?
So I think at the beginning, it will probably be a hard thing for everybody in the first year to find all the ins, outs, and how to do things easier. But at the end of the day, I really have to say that there are numerous contributions of DORA to us as practitioners, to companies, to organizations, financial institutions that have to comply with this. So one of those things, number one thing that I would say is standardization. DORA really provides now a standardized framework for financial institutions and in a way to address all the comprehensive range of cyber threats across the financial sector, and really in this uniform way. Finally, we have that. Then we have a look at continuous improvement benefits. So as you mentioned, there's constant continuous improvement in cybersecurity practices through the requirements for regular testing, reportings, looking at your practices, simulations that you're working on, lessons learned, updating the processes, procedures. Do we have probably some concerns there? Yes, but I'm sure that the regulation will improve on that, is the fact that we cannot forget that there is a need for following the new advanced practices that are happening in the technological sense, growing threats in technological sense that probably will be put in this on the next reiteration of DORA. So it's already a lot, but I see a lot of benefits. But I also see that there will be things, and I'm sure that the creators of DORA will think about the new things that are coming our way in the terms of advancements to the technology. Now, another thing is that we had the concern about these implementation guidelines, but now we also see the RTS came out, going more into specifics of how to implement some of the articles, specifically Article 15 and 16. And there's some good news also, I would like to say, for smaller institutions, that RTS is now proposing a lighter version for smaller institutions, and that's something very important. So if you haven't read the RTS guidelines, that would be very good to go through, because there will be some relief for smaller institutions who cannot afford to do all of the controls in a full force. But overall, to answer, it brings a lot of good positive things to everybody at the end of the day. And it might take maybe a year or so for everybody to realize, but I think overall we will all be more secure on the security posture.
Yeah, I've seen that it also enforces organizations to have best practices around security and overall resilience. So it forces you to work in a better way and more efficient way, even in some cases. Now, you mentioned RTS for smaller institutions. Is it like a number, a definition of what is a smaller institution? Is there a number around that, or it's not defined?
No, they have it in different other directives. And to tell you the truth, I haven't looked at the actual numbers of what it means to be a smaller institution. It's probably by the revenue generated or maybe the number of employees, but I would assume it's more by revenue generated parts. Personally, because I really deal with a lot bigger institutions around, so for us it's a much bigger scope of work, so I've looked at that. But as far as I saw in RTS, there are references to the smaller organizations who will have a little bit of a relief. And I think it's really good news for those who are afraid. And if they haven't still seen the RTS, I really encourage them to read it and to then also reference it to the directives of where they look into what is the meaning of these smaller institutions. But I wanted to bring up the good news that there is something for them.
Yeah, the light at the end of the tunnel for
yes.
smaller organizations.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a big burden for a smaller organization to comply with all of this. Obviously, it becomes harder as you are as smaller and have less manpower, obviously.
Yes.
Now, on a different topic, we've seen a lot of regional compliances, European and American ones, and especially in the financial sector when everything is connected. What do you think? And by the way, we've seen that with other kind of compliance, like GDPR, for instance, and now all organizations around the world, although it's a European regulation, have to comply or try to comply. How do you think DORA is going to affect I know it's not specifically your area, but how do you think it will affect global financial organizations who are not centric to Europe, or their headquarter or initial headquarter is not in Europe? How does that affect them?
Specifically for DORA, I can tell you that I have a lot of peers globally that are asking me already about it, and they're very interested. And we've seen the trend even from before, and I'm proud to say that EU is usually the one that comes up always first with these regulations and thinks about the new directives and regulations, and I'm actually very proud of that. And then others tend to adopt it over time, and they see that these are good regulations. So I think just because it's EU for now, it's not going to stop there. People are still going to be adopting it even outside. And I can tell you on the North American continent, I have friends and peers who are asking about DORA all over the world. In fact, on every continent, there are friends who are asking about DORA and really interested to comply because they know what benefits this can bring to them. Now, they're on a much less pressured timeline to do this. So for them, they have this benefit of buying the time to do it and really having the time to think and maybe evaluate different providers and think how they will do things, as opposed to us who have a stringent deadline by January 25 to comply with such things. But is there an interest from global peers? I'll tell you, from a lot of institutions, there is an interest in DORA globally. And, because it is simply a great regulation coming our way. A lot of work, but great regulation.
And Yelena, I'm assuming that actually anyone doing business in Europe will be touched by the regulation, right? So you don't have to be headquartered in Europe to either have to comply or be aware of the guidelines.
Yes, so even the small organizations that are providing the services to these financial organizations, institutions, will have to show their readiness with DORA. And we will have to also ensure from our end when we deal with them that they have the controls in place. So indeed, regardless of other things, if you're dealing with us who have to comply, you will have to have the controls in place. So very good point.
So compliance is mandatory basically for the European entities of those American or Asian or outside of Europe banks, but obviously does not apply to their foreign to Europe entities, right?
Yeah, it will be interesting. And that's exactly that part where, I talked about the third party assessments and their security posture and their digital resilience, operational resilience. And that's exactly where that comes into play. And we will have to check it. And I mean, it's a great thing. Again, you think from a positive side, it really brings a lot of positive to us in general, overall, for the cybersecurity posture and everybody growing. But at the same time, you can imagine the amount of work we will, as practitioners, have to check that. And the bigger the organization, the bigger work we'll have. So automate wherever possible, I say.
I agree. Howard, I see that we have some questions from the audience piling up, so maybe we want to answer them and have a discussion.
Sure, there's a few good questions that have come in. But Yelena, maybe before we start, I actually have a question, which may be slightly controversial, but let's try it anyway. You often hear from individuals and professionals that that regulation is just kind of holding back business. In particular, in many organizations that I speak to in North America, kind of express that even more. Like government should just get out of the way of business. What would be your take on that as a European and as a professional in the cybersecurity business?
I mean, a lot of people hear that, it's hindering the business, it's taking time, but the thing is, what is the alternative? I will ask on that. And it's a very good question. I'm glad you asked, but what is the alternative? If the governments don't do it, how are we going to ensure it otherwise? Because then people get lenient about the fact of not having to do it and maybe, I'll do it later. But when you're really stringent with time and you have to perform these controls, I'd rather have this, and I'd rather have the governments involved in this and putting the strict deadlines on us than being lenient, because if they don't have it, and let's say I have it, but my third parties don't have it, and I'm not mandated to do it, guess what? I will not be secure. So that's why I say it's a good regulation. I'm glad it's coming. I have to be honest, it's a lot of work for all of us, but I very much welcomed it for a reason that all of us will improve. And finally, we are kind of unifying all of us into this DORA regulation, at least when we work together. So I don't see the alternative. And, there might be complaints, and I hear them as well. But then what is the alternative? Let go.
Good answer. Okay. Actually, we have before we start with the Q&A, we have another polling question. So let's start that. And I know there are people who are various stages in DORA and DORA adoption. So what are the biggest challenges for DORA readiness in your organization? So is it testing and reporting? Is it knowledge of the requirements, budgets, management support, not enough time? And you can answer more than one answer. You could answer all of them. Again, we're looking for an interesting trend. So let's give it a few moments. It's I could imagine some people answering all the above.
While people answer about your last question, one of the things that we see, and again, especially in the financial sector, is that everything is interconnected, right? And we've seen that in the last mortgage crisis in the US, right? One bank crashes, and then the next, and then the next, and then you need the help of the government in order to rescue those banks. And I think one of the things that DORA is doing is on the security level or resilience level, trying to stop that. If one bank in Europe crashes due to some kind of technical issue, external interference, and it can create a domino effect on many other financial institutions. And I think that this is one of the things that it's trying to prevent, right? One bank crashes, and then the next, and then the next, and then all the governments have to bail all these banks out. So I think it's one of the measures to make sure that the banking system in Europe is resilient. And that's exactly the purpose, right? That's where
exactly.
And accountable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So
accountable is a good one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So here's the results. Again, can you see the results? Yeah, on the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So here we go. Testing and reporting, 57%. It's knowledge of requirements, 48. That's interesting. Be interested to get your feedback. Budget, 17. Management support, 9. That's actually encouraging, I guess. And not enough time, 30%. A third of people who participated. Yelena, what do you feel? Does this match your thinking? Any interesting insights?
I mean, many of these, a lot of us are in the same boat. Like when I talk to practitioners in general, not enough time because you have so many other things to juggle at the same time. So definitely, does this not enough time? I'm surprised it's only 30% because there's so many works that we have to do on top of this as practitioners that it's and this takes a full time as well on DORA to comply by January. Budget. I'm surprised it's only 17%, but must be a good team of audience here. Testing and reporting, I agree, because a lot of people perhaps haven't done a lot of this real-time Breaking Bad testings of, as I said, like, probably on Tiber EU exercises or any of the simulated attacks that you can use and tools. Overall, I'm not surprised. I'm surprised on knowledge of the requirements because now, especially with RTS, I would say there is quite spelled out thing, and I really warmly welcome to look into that because they really show you a lot on how to implement. I mean, they tell you on the implementation part what should be done. So, yeah, these are my feedbacks.
Okay. Amit, any thoughts?
Well, I think the knowledge of the requirements points out mainly that not the right people are leading that. Because if you look at big financial organizations, they're used to compliances, right? They do SOC, they do ISO, they have teams dedicated to do that. If you're at this point not aware of the requirements, it probably means that the people that are leading this effort are not doing that on a regular basis. And because while it's not very simple, it's also not very complicated to understand the requirements for DORA. And I agree completely with Elena. The fact that budget and management support are at the low end, it's very encouraging. And again, with the not enough time, I'm not surprised at all. Actually, 30%. I know that a lot of organizations started very late, so at the 30% mark, it's not bad. Let's put it this way.
Yeah, I would have expected a little more.
Yeah.
Or not enough time. Even if you start on time, with the amount of other tasks that you have, it's quite challenging.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to some of the questions. Actually, some people have made some interesting points, less questions, but more statements. So I'll share them. I'll paraphrase them. And so one of the participants wrote that PwC, which I know is very, very active and does a lot of consulting for large insurers, they created for a German insurance company an action plan of over 600 items, and this person was just commenting that the first survey was kind of the kind of whether people are ready or not. It was like a disaster in his mind, in the sense that there's so much to do, and yet many people. Again, we're not doing a large survey, but if people haven't started, there's a lot to do. Another question came in is that DORA does make a lot of descriptive points about what needs to be done. But is there, and Yelena, maybe there's a we can share this after the webinar. Maybe there's a website page where we can refer everybody to, which is there a clear description of what needs to be done to fulfill the regulation and therefore avoid fines? I mean, is it actually laid out in a description anywhere in the DORA website?
Yeah, there is in RTS. I can share that, but I think what they're saying here is that NIS2 is not providing enough. And NIS2 I cannot really help with because it's not for our industry, for the financial. So to tell you the truth, I haven't looked at it. I've heard that it's not that much different. Probably there are differences, but I cannot, as a professional, qualify my opinion on this because I haven't seen it and it doesn't apply to financial institutions. And I really don't know where the details of NIS2 are because I concentrated more on DORA, on the financial sector, given that I'm in that sector.
Yeah, about NIS2, I don't have deep knowledge about NIS2, but NIS2 is guidelines for governments. Basically, it's guidelines for what governments should decide in their territories. So it's not directly affecting organizations. It's basically guidelines for governments to decide on laws that then will apply to organizations. So it's a little less defined than DORA. DORA is very, very well defined in what you need to do in order to comply. NIS2 is a little bit different. It's more of a guidelines for governments.
Okay. Next question is, and maybe Amit, you can lead on this. Is there any specific advice around evidence collection? In other words, testing in an automated manner and patching is one thing, but do we need to expose the evidence or documented? Is a documented process sufficient, or does there need to be actual evidence collection?
No, of course. Basically, you should have some kind of an audit log of every, obviously, cyber event or every irregular event that's happened. That's part of the regulation. It's part of the regulation, not just in DORA, in other compliances as well. Basically, if we talk about change management, about logging of events, this is, of course, mandatory. One of the things, if you look at specifically around security, you must always have a way. The bottom line is you must always have a way to look at retrospect at what happened from different angles. So you need to keep the information if you've been hacked, if there was some kind of security event, you have to have the logs to investigate it. And again, I'm not sure what's the exact timeline in DORA, but a lot of those compliances, you must keep track of that for months or for years. And again, it changes per industry, per compliance, but this is a must-have. And even regardless of compliances, if some event happened in your network, in your company that is related to security, you must have evidence to investigate it, post-mortem.
Yelena, anything to add there?
I mean, I would think from practitioner point of view, when we do any of the testings, be it automated or be it manual, I would apply one principle there. I would apply the principle of the reporting. So when you're reporting, you obviously by that time have enough evidence when you're reporting to your senior management that you will keep and have there, because otherwise how are you going to report if you didn't have that evidence? So you will have it somewhere. Now, is DORA asking you to have that evidence given to authorities? I don't think so, but it's asking you to have some evidence on what you do. So for me, the evidence already of reporting on what I have done on my exercises is evidence enough to keep evidence of reporting to the management. Mm-hmm. So the reporting part would be very important for me. That would be my evidence of what work I have done in the background.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, we spoke a little earlier about some, it's called light regulations for smaller institutions. Do you have any examples of what that could be? And is there any is there any link to a particular area of the website or some other resource that you could point us to?
So there's a bit, as I said, in the RTS guidelines standards, and I'll just find the link and send it later. But some of the things that I have seen already are, for example, on third parties, at least maintain the list of third-party providers and critical ones, at least perform some kind of a due diligence on them. So maybe not the full-blown things that bigger organizations can do, but at least do something on testings, at least do pen tests annually or biannually. So they're really cutting down on the amount of requirements that maybe bigger organizations or so DORA assumes that we can do much easier. But it's RTS, and I will try to find the.
We can send it after. With the recording, we'll send a link. So no problem. Thank you. Just one other observation that someone was raising the question about whether financial institutions have enough budget. How many such institutions run out of money? That's I think a fair point. I think
they don't have allocated budget.
Right, exactly. Like a lot of things, there are many requirements on cyber resilience, cyber security. At the end of the day, it's about risk management, and do organizations have enough in place for what's expected and what's not expected? So yeah, but agree. Okay, Yelena, one other question for you. You work in industry, and any particular examples of a really let's say the biggest challenge you've encountered when working either in the EIB or in talking with other financial institutions vis-a-vis this regulation?
I mean, the biggest challenge is the time, honestly, time and resource, because it really requires, by the amount of controls we are going to be asked, it requires a lot more resource, because this is year over year, and time to complete it. So perhaps if we had more resources, that would compensate for this time issue as well at the same time. Other than that, I think all of us, I can say we are quite glad that our management also accepts it, and they know and they support this. So it's not like there are challenges from that end, but time and resource is really a challenge. And then, as if you have resource, the time is compensated, but the challenge is also finding the good resource, which we already have on global level problems with.
Absolutely. Okay. So that's more or less all the questions I think we have for today. Any final comments? Any final recommendations? Start, Yelena, with you, and then Amit.
No, I mean, perhaps I would just say that if you haven't started with DORA and you have to comply, I think really don't waste time. It's not a small amount of work. It's a really serious amount of work that you need to put in this. So if you haven't started, start as soon as possible. Leverage off the peers to see what they have done, because you will need that. You will need there's not enough time left. So good luck with that. Try to look for automation anywhere where possible, on third party, on digital resilience testing. There are some ideas everybody has on this, but automation will help. And good luck. I hope we all can see each other next year and say, hey, we are all compliant and doing great on DORA.
Mm-hmm. Amit, any final thoughts?
I actually want to circle back to one of the comments about 600 action items for one of the largest insurers in Europe. It sounds a lot, but when you talk about the sizes, the question, again, there's a little bit of context here. Is it 600 action items multiplied by different system, or an absolute number, right? For a huge company, 600 action items, it's not, it might be big, but it's not very big, right? If it's the absolute number of 600 action items across a huge company in Europe, that sounds like a good plan, right? If you have multipliers, you need to do this action multiplied by 200 systems and so forth, then it becomes a huge task. Obviously, that's the regulation, and that's what you have to do. I really see DORA doing things that other previous regulations did not do. I think that if you take it in the right and progress with it in the right way, it can improve a lot of work processes and ingrain best practices around security and different resilience into organizations. And also by complying with DORA, you also are covered, for a lot of the SOC, many of the ISOs, NIS2 has been mentioned. So, once organizations comply, and we've seen that a lot of the supporting organizations to those financial companies comply, I think it can put a lot of organization in a good place. It's going to take a lot of hard work, but it's once you adopt these type of processes and work processes, I think it puts companies in a very good place.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I think that's pretty much all we have time for today. I'd like to thank Yelena and Amit for your insights and for your time, and everybody that joined. It was certainly very informative to me, and I hope it was for you. One more little plug, and I'll share it now on the chat. So if you enjoyed the session, first of all, please share it with any of your colleagues or anyone you think would be interested in these regulations and the topic in general. We also will be having another webinar next month with a cyber influencer in North America to get more of a North American perspective, not on DORA, but on other topics. Dr. Zero Trust, if you have never heard him, look him up. But please register. And for the time being, thank you and have a great day. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.